The soft glow of the monitor was a familiar comfort in the dimness of the study, a small window into our living room. It was where little Leo, our son, spent most of his waking hours, a whirlwind of curious energy. The camera, perched discreetly on a bookshelf, was originally just for him, a way to check in when he was playing alone, or to keep an eye on the nanny when we occasionally had one. Sarah, my wife, had been all for it back then. Peace of mind, she'd called it. Now, I doubted she even remembered it was there, let alone how to access the feed. It had become my quiet confidant, a silent witness to a truth I was struggling to accept. I'm Liam, and my wife is Sarah. We've been together for nearly 10 years, married for 5, and Leo is our world. Sarah is beautiful, charming, and when she's fully present, she lights up a room. But lately, her presence, or rather her lack of presence, had been a gnawing ache in my chest. It wasn't anything as dramatic as infidelity. My heart would shatter if it were. This was subtler, more insidious, a steady erosion of trust built on a mountain of small, seemingly insignificant lies. It started subtly, too. I'd glance at the camera feed from my phone while at work, just a quick check on Leo. But then I'd see Sarah, and something wouldn't quite align with what she'd told me. For instance, her work. She had the enviable flexibility of setting her own hours, a perk we both appreciated. But almost every morning, she'd text me, "Just leaving for work, honey," or "Traffic's bad, left super early today." Then I'd check the camera. And there she'd be, still at home, sipping coffee, casually scrolling through her phone, sometimes for another half an hour, sometimes even longer, before finally heading out. It was a minor thing, a few extra minutes here or there, but it was a lie. A small, unnecessary one. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe she got distracted. Maybe she meant she was about to leave. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. We all have those moments, right? But then the pattern became undeniable. The sleep incidents were harder to ignore. I work long hours, and by the time I get home, I'm often exhausted, ready to collapse. Sarah, on the other hand, often seemed to be in a perpetual state of needing rest. I'd walk into the living room, and there she'd be, stretched out on the couch, eyes closed, phone beside her. "Oh, I must have dozed off," she'd murmur, rubbing her eyes as I walked in. But the camera told a different story. So many times, I'd see her wide awake, scrolling through her phone, sometimes for an hour or more, completely alert. Yet, the moment she heard my footsteps approaching the room, her eyes would snap shut, her breathing would deepen, and she'd transform into a convincing portrait of slumber. This one stung more, because her sleep often meant my burden. If she was sleeping, I was automatically on sole parent duty, sole dinner duty, sole everything duty. Leo, though sweet, was a toddler. He needed constant attention, meals, diaper changes, playtime. And by the time I was wrestling with dinner and trying to keep him entertained, I'd look over at the screen and see her, still staring at her phone, utterly lucid, while I felt myself fraying at the edges. Then there were the cleaning claims. "I spent hours cleaning today, Liam, I'm absolutely shattered," she'd declare, collapsing onto a chair. I'd nod, trying to be sympathetic, but a quiet voice in my head, armed with visual evidence, would contradict her. The camera wouldn't lie. I'd review the footage later, after Leo was asleep and the house was quiet. 2 hours of cleaning often translated to 15 minutes of desultory tidying, interspersed with long stretches of phone use or simply staring into space. The dust bunnies under the couch remained, the overflowing laundry basket mocked me, and the sticky residue on the kitchen counter glared. And yet, she'd present it as a monumental effort. The work-from-home days were similar. "I'm swamped with reports," she'd tell me, needing quiet time to focus. I'd happily take Leo out, or keep him occupied in another room, doing my best to minimize noise. But when I checked the feed, her computer screen would often be displaying a Netflix show or a YouTube video, not spreadsheets or documents. She'd be engrossed, perhaps eating snacks, completely absorbed in entertainment, while I was carefully tiptoeing around, managing a demanding toddler, believing I was supporting her hard work. These incidents, individually, seemed petty. So she lies about leaving for work a bit late. So she fakes being asleep. So what if she exaggerates her cleaning efforts or watches a show instead of working? Many people do these things. But for me, they had accumulated into a suffocating weight. It wasn't just the lies themselves, but what they represented. They meant I was carrying an increasingly disproportionate share of our shared life. I was doing the vast majority of the childcare, the chores, the mental load of running a household, all while she was creating a false narrative of her own contributions. The resentment began to fester. Every time I cleaned a toilet she claimed to have scrubbed, every time I cooked a meal after a full day's work while she was asleep, every time I put Leo to bed knowing she'd been watching a show for hours, a small part of me felt betrayed. It wasn't fair. We were partners. We were supposed to be a team. But it felt like I was the only one playing. The camera, initially a tool for security, had become a mirror reflecting the cracks in our partnership. And it forced me to confront a difficult truth. These weren't just minor lies. They were symptoms of a deeper problem. They indicated a lack of accountability, a disregard for my efforts, and a troubling pattern of deception that extended beyond casual fibs. One evening, I reached my breaking point. It had been an exceptionally tough day at work, followed by an evening alone with Leo. He was cranky, teething, and refusing to sleep. I'd managed to get him down eventually, but the kitchen was a disaster, and I was bone-wearingly tired. Sarah was in the bedroom, asleep, she'd said earlier, an hour before I walked in. I checked the camera. And there she was, illuminated by the cold blue light of her phone, scrolling through social media, a faint smile playing on her lips. She wasn't tired. She wasn't asleep. She was just opting out. I watched her for a long moment, the exhaustion and frustration mixing with a profound sadness. This wasn't the Sarah I married. Or perhaps, this was a side of her I hadn't truly seen until now. The camera, this silent, unbiased observer, had stripped away the polite fictions, revealing an uncomfortable reality. I closed the camera app, the screen going dark. The decision had been forming slowly, gathering weight with each observed deception. It was no longer about the camera, or the individual lies. It was about trust. It was about partnership. It was about feeling seen and valued in my own home. I knew I had to bring it up. Not with anger, not with accusations, and certainly not by leading with "I saw you on the camera." That would only create defensiveness and shift the focus. It needed to be about how I felt, overwhelmed, unappreciated, and concerned about the honesty between us. It needed to be about our shared responsibilities, about the kind of marriage we both wanted. I stood there in the quiet study, the weight of the untouched dishes in the sink pressing down on me. The image of Sarah's awake face on the camera screen burned into my mind. It was going to be a hard conversation. One of the hardest we'd ever had. But it was a conversation that, for the sake of our marriage and our family, we needed to have. And this time, there would be no faking sleep, no exaggerated claims, just the raw, uncomfortable truth.